Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Live with Weiss. It's been a lot of fun. These past couple of weeks, we've been really diving into the new year of enhancing ourselves, adapting to the new world, and building skills to help you evolve as a seller. Or in this case, it could be anything. You could be a marketer, you could be a customer support rep, you could be any one of those things, and this could apply. But specifically, we always want to focus on the sales side for this particular channel. In the last episode, we talked about something that was super important, which was data. More importantly about the data is understanding who you are from a data perspective. More importantly, performance. Because being able to look at your data and understand what you're great at, what you're magnificent at, but also where you might find you might need a lift in some areas is super important. But you can't just rely on data, because remember, the number one thing that is extraordinarily important is the success. And the number one thing that creates success is you and the people. So besides data, you got to focus on yourself. You got to be able to build skills around who you are as an individual and be able to identify those skills. But here's the funny thing. I've been on LinkedIn, been very, very active, seeing a lot of great information being shared, a lot of tips, a lot of tricks, and being able to take that and apply to your daily routine. But here's the funny question. What is your daily routine? What do you do? More importantly, why do you do it in the first place? That's probably the number one question. We never think about that, right? It's kind of just off to the side. We see things and we just want to do it, but we don't know why we are that way in the first place. And I truly believe there is no better way to adopt or build new skills than knowing where you came from in the first place. I'd love to talk about that in depth myself, but I figure why not bring somebody who knows a ton about this subject, how you build your habits in the first place. And that's why I want to introduce to everybody the Weiss, the almighty Rob Christman.
Good morning, Matt. Thank you for that introduction. Now I have to live up to it. So thanks for setting the bar high.
Listen, in this show, the bar is, there is no bar, right? It's a matter of what the people are watching can ingest, enjoy, and think about as they move on through the year in building new skills. Now, I would love to talk about you, Rob. I would love to give everybody an intro, but really, I know you better than some of the audience that's here, so I'm just going to let you handle yourself and introducing yourself.
Well, thank you, Matt. And first of all, it's an honor to be here today, and I'm really excited about this opportunity. So I have been selling for as long as I can remember. I started selling back in the days I was in college. And, back when we had little tablets so that we had etch and hammer into. So it's been a long time. And for years, I was mediocre at the selling side of things until I went to a seminar, which really just snapped things into place and really put me into the top levels. Because I learned how to change habits. Actually, I had habits that were changed for me. So I wanted to learn, how can I change these habits myself? How do I build the watch instead of just telling time? So I went and I started studying neurolinguistic programming, and I became a master practitioner in NLP. Then I learned neurostrategies, and I learned psychology, and I just kept digging deeper and deeper into the how to make that magic happen. So it's really exciting. And Matt, I also want to take a moment to shamelessly plug not one, but 2 books.
He's an author, everybody. An author.
Author. Yeah. Yeah. So I've learned how to use a computer and put words to paper. So in my first book, Postcards from the Road, we talk about a lot of things, including your own personal values, setting goals, and getting deeper into your own psyche. In the second book, Unlocking the Leadership Mystery, we talk about leadership, not just of leading others, but how you can lead yourself as well. And we'll talk about some of the things that are in the book during the course of our conversation today, Matt.
I love it. And make sure, guys, and I'll be in the chat itself and in the comments, there will be links to the books. Definitely check them out.
Available on Amazon.
By the way, Bezos stepped down the other day, is going to be stepping down the other day. So another topic for another day, but definitely check it out on Amazon. We'll share the links in the comments.
That's right. Buy the books before Bezos steps down. Unlocking the Leadership.
So with that background, everybody, and Rob, I definitely want people to that are watching this to understand, especially about you and your special connection with habits, how NLP and habits really connect with each other. Is there a simple way to put that?
Well, the simple way of putting it is who we are today is just a culmination of all the decisions that we've made across the point of our lifetime. And the decisions that we make on a daily basis, on an hour to hour, and a moment to moment basis, are based on really our own personal values. It's based on who we see ourselves as, our identity, and our internal representation. And those things, the identity, the internal representation, and our own personal values, are how we make our decisions. And those are what creates our beliefs in ourselves, and our beliefs create our habits. So we won't do anything that's incongruent with what our own belief systems are.
Right. And I think that's fascinating, because obviously we think of habits are just things we do on a regular basis, right? And this is important because habits are just are things that we naturally do. We don't think about it, because I take this quote all the time from you, Rob, and I apologize, but I use it on a regular, because the habits are things that you've just practiced that have become permanent over time. But what I find more interesting is what actually develops those habits in the first place, because there's no way you can change, stretch, conquer current habits without actually knowing the true nature of where they came from in the first place. And you're saying they come from beliefs.
It comes from beliefs. It comes from your personal environment. It comes from your background. So oftentimes your beliefs are created by sometimes your parents from a very, very early age, sometimes your peer group. These are all very big influences on who we are. And we have either empowering beliefs or limiting beliefs. Those are the two kinds of beliefs that we have. Whereas you might have a belief saying, yeah, I'm really, really good at talking to people. If you believe that, then you're going to go out and have better conversations, because you're more open to possibly being rejected by somebody. And because at that point in time, you're saying, that person just was this, that, or the other thing. But if you have a belief that nobody likes me, I'm shy, I need to just, crawl into my rock, I'm a bad conversationalist, you go up to somebody, you work up the nerve to go up to somebody, and they blow you off, and all of a sudden it's about you. It's like, see, I'm not good enough. I'm just not good enough. So these beliefs create the patterns and the habits that we have out there. So oftentimes they're instilled into us. Most of the time they're just put there on an unconscious basis, and we don't even realize that these habits have become created, because it just becomes a pattern that we run. It's like a software on a computer. If you plug a bad piece of software in, your computer is going to keep running it over and over and over until you realize, hey, there's something wrong. And then you diagnose it, and then you're like, there's the problem. And then you just either update or change that piece of software to something that's more empowering. That makes sense to you, Matt?
Yeah, I think it's from the empowering side, but also the metaphor that you use with computer and software and updating software. Which, by the way, I'm proud of you for updating your software on a regular basis, Rob. This is, you have to, right? The performance is super important. The performance of your computer is what is going to help you achieve whatever you need to, because every time you run old software or old updates, it slows it down. It holds you back on doing things. And so it's very good to hear that. Now, I know you talked about empowering, especially in having that confidence. And there's a difference between, that empowering piece, but also the, and you're going to be throwing out a ton of terms. So I apologize if I miss a piece. There's empowering. And then what was the second one?
Limiting beliefs.
Limiting beliefs. So the big question becomes, how do we get there, Rob? How do we begin to just identify these? Because we talked about it earlier. Sometimes it's just unconsciously because it's been influenced over time. How do we begin to just identify this stuff?
Well, first we just have to take, and let's go back to your segment from last week. You have to look at your own internal data. So if we're talking about sales as an example, and you are basically struggling every single month to hit your quota, you're close, but it's always a scrape and a struggle because you're sitting there and you're having a conversation with yourself. And by the way, Matt, who is the most important conversation that we have with every single day, except for, other than with each other, of course? Ourselves, exactly.
I talk to myself on a regular basis, Rob. It's crazy. Sometimes I think I'm a crazy person.
No,
I talk to myself all the time.
It's okay to talk to yourself. It's even okay to answer. Yes. But if you ever find yourself going, then you might have a problem. So the most important conversation we have every day is with ourselves. And oftentimes that conversation is not a pretty conversation because you're sitting there saying, man, I don't know if I can get this next car deal. I don't know if I can get this next SaaS deal. I don't know how I'm going to make this number. Well, yeah, you do. You have to just be honest with yourself and have a truthful conversation and take stock of that data. Are you making enough phone calls? Are you speaking with complete confidence? Why aren't you doing it? So these habits, there's a reason why these habits started. They are in somehow, way, shape, or form serving you, or else you wouldn't have them. Sometimes they're serving you because they're keeping you in a comfort zone, Matt. And I want to let me talk to you about comfort zones for a moment, because we all live in a comfort zone. And I live in the state of Florida. I live in South Florida, and I'm used to 75 to 85 degrees on a daily basis. As y'all can see, I'm wearing a flannel shirt.
I'm so jealous.
Especially if you're in Minnesota right now. I know you are. So I'm wearing a flannel shirt this morning because when I woke up, it's 44 degrees outside. And I know some of you are looking at me like 44, I'd kill for 44. But when you're accustomed to yesterday being 75 and you wake up, it's 44, and the heat and air conditioner were both off, you can imagine that it's cold inside the house. So the first thing I did is I ran to the thermostat, looked at it, and I said something I won't repeat right now. And I flipped that thermostat up to 70 degrees to get the temperature up in here to get into my comfort zone. And we all have those comfort zones. It's like, Matt, if you left the house where you are right now and you left the windows open and you didn't have the heater on and you went out for a few hours and you came back, what's the temperature going to be out in the house?
So depending on the day, it might drop down to maybe 20, maybe 10 degrees inside the house if I'm gone for a couple hours.
All right. So after you close all the windows, what's the first thing you're going to do?
I besides throw on a jacket because it's going to take hours to change the temperature, I'm going to raise the temperature.
Okay.
Oh, we lost Rob for a second here, guys. Hold on just a moment. Oh, man. Good thing my video editing skills allow me to cut this for later so I can update it. Maybe it's too hot in Florida at the moment, and maybe the power went out or his internet went out. But as Rob was talking about, in this comfort zone, right, that we're building, what he's getting into is really going in and changing it back to what we're comfortable about. I am not at all comfortable at 10 degrees. Nobody should be. Just like Rob should not be comfortable in Florida at, device disconnected. Just like Rob is not comfortable leaving all of his windows open in Florida in the middle of summer and it being 100 degrees. So what we naturally do in this barrier that we have is we go to that thermostat. We change it and go back to our comfort zone. Just think about it, each and every one of you. What is your comfort zone on your thermostat? Is it 60 degrees? Is it 50 degrees? Is it 55? Is it 70? All depends. Everyone's going to be just a little bit different. And Rob came back.
I think I really need to update that computer software because
you spoke way too soon, Rob. But I was giving everybody a little piece and continuing that, and I would definitely want you to continue your story. But that idea of just running back to your thermostat, going back to the comfort zone, because like you said, I'm not leaving the house at 20 degrees, at 10 degrees, because that is not comfortable for anybody.
Exactly. So whether you have the thermostat set where it's too cold and you turn the temperature back up because you want that temperature to rise, or if it's summertime here in Florida and the house is like 92 degrees, I'm going to put the air conditioner on to get that temperature to come down, because we all have a comfort zone, whether that comfort zone is like 68 to 70 degrees or 65 to 70 degrees. Everybody has a comfort zone where they are. And I use this metaphor because we have that in our brains as too, because some of us have these limiting beliefs that I'm not good enough. And that comes out in this way. Let's say that you're selling cars and you're out there and your quota is to sell 15 cars a month. And you come out in January and you sell 17 cars. In February, you hit 20 cars. And you start off March strong. You're saying, how am I doing this? I shouldn't be doing. You're not saying that consciously, but unconsciously you're saying, I shouldn't be doing this. I'm not good enough to be selling this many cars. And your limiting beliefs will cause your behaviors, we'll go back to behaviors and habits, to push that temperature down because it's getting too hot. So every time that you get too good and it's not congruent with the beliefs you have, your behaviors come out and you self-sabotage, whether you realize it or not. It comes down on the temperature. Same way as if you're only selling 10 cars a month, you're like, oh, I'm better than this. And what do? You start making those extra phone calls. You don't miss the steps on the demoing. You ask questions. You push the hot buttons and you ask for the order. You make sure it gets done. And all of a sudden it's not too cold anymore. You start warming things up. That's why I use and there's a big difference, by the way, between a thermometer and a thermostat. The thermometer is how many sales that we put out. That's just measuring the temperature. The thermostat is where we set it for that comfort zone. So what I would hope that it be your biggest takeaway from this session is to realize that thermostat is something that you can just walk up to in your own mind and raise the temperature, because everybody has the ability for greatness. It's what you choose to do that makes all the difference in the world. So those habits are the difference between mediocrity and greatness. What you choose to do is the difference between mediocrity and greatness. Just because you have a piece of software that's installed in your computer system, your brain, doesn't mean that's the same software you have to be running in 5 minutes from now, an hour from now, a year from now. You're not locked into that software.
So just to reiterate for everybody, that comfort zone has barriers around it, right? And Rob, it's such a good way to depict it, because everyone's got a thermostat. Unless if you live in Vermont in the middle of nowhere, then you're using a pellet stove to regulate heat, but you're still doing it, right? There's still a comfort zone. You're still regulating how much pellets you're putting in. But I find that to be fascinating. I even thought, even outside this realm, especially for managers of sellers out there, you've got your thermometer, the sales, but then you have the comfort zone of what your team is comfortable at. And I think it makes it even harder, because you think as a manager of a sales organization, it's just a matter of, okay, let's hit the number, let's go. Is everybody comfortable at the level that you're going at? And I think it becomes a bigger picture as someone who runs a team. As an individual, you have to focus on yourself, right? You're going to drive yourself. As a manager, you have to build a comfort zone or move a comfort zone. I keep on hitting my microphone. You have to move that comfort zone to greatness, but everybody needs to be in there. Because, Rob, I can imagine you've probably seen somebody try to move a comfort zone, but not everybody's comfortable with that zone.
That's why they call it a comfort zone. So,
not everybody's on board. Go ahead.
It's true. So, and think of it this way: as a manager, and everybody who's watching this is a manager in some way, shape, or form, because we manage ourselves every minute of every day. If you're also managing other people, you have to keep this in mind. We always have to continue to stretch people. We have to constantly remember to take them out of their comfort zone and just stretch them a little bit. And if you could just imagine for a moment that I had a rubber band in my hand. When I take this rubber band and I do this to it, what's happening to the rubber band right now, Matt?
Stretching. But when I let go, what happens now? Conforms back to the original shape.
Yet at the same time, it's a little bit bigger than it was before you stretched it. So that comfort zone has stretched just a little bit. And if you continue to do things, to choose to do things that are different than you're doing now, to put you outside of that comfort zone, to take something where you've identified as a limiting habit and to make adjustments to it, if you continue to stretch yourself, yes, you are going to go back a little bit, but you're going to have moved forward from where you started. And I'll give you an example.
Sure.
During COVID, as many people, I put on some COVID weight. I went from fit Rob to fat Rob. And
I should be laughing, but that really worked. I'm also laughing because I'm relating as well.
So I decided that let me take a look at the habits that I've formed. Well, I wasn't going out as much. I was eating more. I was eating later. And I said, okay, here are the habits I have to change. First, I need to get more steps in on a daily basis. So I started monitoring the amount of steps that I was taking on a daily basis.
Right.
I had to stop eating within 2 hours of bedtime for me. And I had to eliminate the sugars. If I did those three things, I knew that I was going to hit the next level. Well, I went out, started walking outdoors because fortunately in Florida until last night, I can. So I did. And I was tired. And there were days I didn't want to go out, but I knew I had to continue to stretch myself so that these habits that were unconscious happen that I put on the COVID weight became conscious habits. And like any habit, there are steps because there are challenges. Like, for example, there are 4 steps of learning. Okay. You have unconscious incompetence. Now, unconscious incompetence basically means that I really suck at this, but I don't even know it because I haven't had to do it. So,
Yeah.
Okay. Think back to when you first started driving. Okay. When you first started driving, before you ever got behind the wheel, you watched other people drive. You watched your parents, your grandparents, your siblings, maybe, even friends. But until you got behind the wheel, you didn't realize that you sucked. So you get behind the wheel, you put the key in, you're feeling all good. You're like, how hard can this be? I've played all these racing games on at the arcades or in Nintendo or wherever you played it, even on a Wii. It's like, oh yeah, I can do this. You put the car in drive, and the first thing you have to do is think, right foot gas. So you put the right foot on the gas, and you're like, whoa, and whoever's in the car with you is sitting there like holding on to the old shit bar really bad, saying, no. So you finally realize that you've had this unconscious incompetence, that you're horrible at something, but you never realized because you never had to do it. It's like me playing a video game. The A, the B, the button, the jump, and the other controls. I'm like, just give me something I could use my mouse or a tablet for. It's just, I have that, because once you realize it, that unconscious incompetence turns into conscious incompetence. That's when the switch goes off. It's like, damn, I know that I'm bad at this now. So
Rob, I got a funny car example because I'll never forget this. Those moments that you never forget. I could relate to that in that unconscious incompetence of, I'm going to be a great driver, right? I already knew it. And then I remember picking up my Acura Integra. It was a 95 white 2-door Acura Integra. And my father and I are driving as we're done. And I had my learner's permit. I was like, who needs this? And as soon as I got to my first light, rule of thumb is, if it's green, you go. If it's yellow, you should probably slow down, come to a stop. And for a lot of people that are from New Jersey, if it's yellow, try to rush through it as fast as possible before it turns red. If you are even a quarter of the way through the light, you have the right to go through even if it turns red. Well, for me, what I ended up doing was I pulled up, and as the yellow light turned up, I didn't know exactly what to do. And I stopped in the middle of the intersection because the light was red in the middle of the intersection. And I'll never forget all the horns from all the directions going, and my father yelling at me, "You need to move. What are you doing?"
So that was a period of time when you realized that you needed to put a little bit of work into it because you became conscious of the incompetence that you have in that skill set at that point in time.
Yes.
So now you start practicing a little bit, and don't worry about it, Matt. We all have our stories. When I first moved to Florida, I had never driven a stick shift. I learned how to drive on an automatic. It's like easy, put in gear, hit the gas, you go. And I've been driving for a bunch of years. I moved to Florida. Company I was with, they issued me a 5-speed. And I'm like, how hard can this be? I get to the busiest intersection in Fort Lauderdale. And for those of you who know, I'm at the intersection of US Highway 1 and Oakland Park Boulevard. And I get to the light, it turned red. I'm the second car waiting for the light. And at this point in time, I hadn't stalled. I made it probably about 10 miles from where I started without stalling. So I'm feeling good. Light turns green. I put the car into gear, let off the clutch. It stalls. And I'm like, damn. Get the car back, start moving again. The light had turned red again. Now I'm the first car at the light. The line behind is ridiculous. Light turns green. What happens? Sure enough, I stalled out again. I'm sweating. I'm pouring buckets. I'm like a cartoon figure at that point in time. It's just absolutely terrible. I'm having these negative conversations with myself. It's like I'm not even going to repeat the things that were going on in my head back then, but it was not a pretty conversation, but it was telling me how bad I am at this skill set. So finally I get the car going, and I get to where I need to go. And that evening I spent hours between the time I got home and bedtime just practicing stopping at stop signs and going, stopping at stop signs and going, because my conscious incompetence needed to change to conscious competence. I had to think about, okay, foot on brake, left foot on clutch. Okay, let out the clutch, put the car into gear, little bit of gas, go. And so I had to think about it. And I started getting okay about it, but I still had to think about every step of the way.
Yeah.
So the next step in changing a habit is becoming consciously competent at what you're doing. So, and as you practice and you continue, and the more hours and days and weeks I put behind the wheel of that old Ford Tempo 5-speed, it's like it just became like anything else. I just get behind the wheel. Next thing I know, I'm at my destination. I don't remember anything else that happened in between because I stopped thinking about it. Because that skill set went from having to think about it to just doing it. And that's when you become unconsciously competent. And that's the mastery stage, is when you have that unconscious competence that you can just do it without thinking about it, is when the habit is actually instilled inside of you.
So, Rob,
Matt,
before we go any further, what I love for you to do, and I'm going to be honest with everybody here, that is some important things to remember. I've heard this a couple times, and it still becomes a mouthful to say. Rob, if you don't mind, could you repeat those 4 steps again?
I hope so.
I hope so.
Yes.
Like, if you don't mind, for the audience, just repeat those 4 steps and kind of just like a little bit of blurb next to each one, as like almost like your own interpretation of the definition of what that is.
Of course. So first, think of them as steps, because you're going to continually improve and get to a higher place with each step along the way. Mm-hmm. So the bottom step is what is called unconscious incompetence.
Unconscious incompetence.
That is when you are bad at something and you don't even know it. And that's fine. There are so many different things. We use driving as an example because most everybody who's watching this, most everybody in the United States at least, have all had the experience of driving at some point in their lives. So you can understand that the first time you try it, you're really not very good at it. And it's the same thing with a video game. The first time that you are holding that controller, you don't realize that you're bad at something. Or, when you move from, say, a Mac to a PC, you've changed on things, and all of a sudden you realize, I don't know. And it's okay to say, I don't know. Because as we're talking about unconscious incompetence, I want to tell you the 3 most dangerous words in the English language when it comes to self-improvement and learning. And those 3 words are, I know that. Because once you say, I know that, you've shut yourself off for anything else that's coming after that. So realize that there are things that we don't know, and that's okay. Because when you know something and you say, yeah, I know that, you're not going to learn whatever ways of doing it better, ways of doing it differently, alternatives. I'm a big believer that the person with the most options is going to be the most successful. And when I say the most options, it's the most choices of ways of doing things. If you can only go to work on one road every single day and there's no other road to get you there, if a tanker trailer jackknives, you might as well go home because there's no way you can do it. But if you have other highways, other side roads, surface roads that you could take, along the way, you have the option that you could always get to where you want to go.
There's always options.
There's always options. You just have to open your mind to them. And when you open your mind, you might find that I'm not good at that option. You have that because you've never done it. You have that unconscious incompetence at that point in time.
Conscious incompetence.
Unconscious incompetence just basically means I've never thought about it. I've never tried it. I'm not good at it.
There we
That
go.
doesn't mean you can't become outstanding at it. But in this point in time, you haven't even worked at it. So, of course, you're not going to be good at that point. The next step is conscious incompetence. That's when you realize, all right, when it comes to this, I'm not good at it. And I'll use the example of dunking a basketball. If you put a basketball in my hands on a standard size hoop, I know that I am incompetent at trying to slam that ball down. Now, does that mean I can never do it? Probably. I just don't have the physicality to get it done. But there are different ways. Maybe if we lowered the hoop, maybe if we put a trampoline in there's different ways of doing it. But if you just hand me the ball and say, go dunk it, as is, I know because I've tried it, I'm consciously incompetent at it.
Consciously incompetent.
Consciously, that just means that there's a skill that I have not become good at, and I know it.
There we go.
Now, it's an important skill. Let's say it's something that's trainable. Let's say it's sales. And to me, sales is something that can be learned. It's something that, and somebody had asked me a question before the stream. They asked me, is sales a passion or an addiction?
Ooh.
And I looked at it and I'm saying to myself, it's a passion, because the definition of sales in my eyes is the transference of emotion from the seller to the buyer. And that comes with passion. And yeah, it's borderline addiction, because when you want to be outstanding at it, you're going to make the extra call and then the extra call after that. So and when you're passionate about something, it could border on addiction. But back in the day when I first started selling college radio advertising, I was horrible. And I realized that I was horrible. I was consciously incompetent. So what did I do? I started watching other people do it. I started going to a few seminars. I started reading books. I started practicing in front of the mirror. I started just forgetting about me and started realizing it's about the person that I'm interacting with that's more important. So I started working on those skill sets, but I had to think about it. It's like, okay, when they say this, maybe I'll try the feel, felt, found. I understand how you feel. Many of our other customers have felt the same way. But when they did this and the other thing, we found that. And I practiced these things, but I had to think about them. So I became consciously competent in that skill. So the third step on the stairs is conscious competence. And that's where the habit that we're changing is being worked on, but still thought about.
Right.
And then after practice, drill, rehearse, practice, drill, rehearse. And as Matt alluded to a little while ago, that practice makes permanent.
Yep.
Practice does not make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect, but practice makes permanent. So after continuously the tweaking and working on things and studying and going to more seminars and more learning and working it in the field, eventually I stopped thinking about it and I hit the level of unconscious competence. Now, this is where we stopped, but this is also where we begin. Because once you have that unconscious competence, to continually get better, to strive for excellence and outstanding, you have to constantly stretch that rubber band to get outside the comfort zone. Once you find yourself in a comfort zone, it's time to take stock and to find something else that you are unconsciously incompetent about and make those skills better. Even if it's something you just mastered, there's always a way of getting better at it.
Rob, it reminds me really of a cycle. consistently, right? When we talk about, and I'm going to try to not fumble it, but when you go from unconscious incompetence to unconscious competence,
from
going through all those cycles, right, from start to finish, the cycle almost begins all over again, just in a different direction. You're continuously taking that barrier, right, that comfort zone, and continuing to stretch it. You're not trying to break your comfort zone necessarily, maybe break through, but you're not trying to break yourself. What you're trying to do is stretch and expand that comfort zone. Like you said with thermostat, maybe one day you wake up and it's off 5 degrees and you're okay with it because you are now comfortable in that zone as well, but you're still comfortable in the other zone too.
Yeah, you continue to make that larger and larger and larger. It's the bigger box mentality. Like right now, this box is okay, but as I stretch myself to get all the new learnings, to get all the new skill sets, to get all the new habits into that box, it's going to be overflowing, which is great because that's when you can start teaching others as it's overflowing. And it's also time for you to get yourself a bigger box so that you can continue to add into it to get better. So our skills are continuously evolving. Times are changing constantly. We have to constantly change as well. And the behaviors and habits that we had 10 years ago, 5 years ago, they're just not going to serve you in the same way today that they did even a year ago because of the way the world has changed. So we have to continuously change. We have to continuously evolve so that we stay on top of things and stay ahead.
Couldn't have put it any better, Rob. So I think really for everybody here, what we want to do now is take a look at the comments. I got a few comments here, Rob, that I think is really important. The questions that came up that people are curious about. And I don't want to, some of them are a little bit longer, some are a little bit shorter. So I'm going to read them off to you. The first one, and I'd love for you and I to definitely, interact with these people and make sure that, we can identify what's going on there and then. So one of our users named Tony said, how can sales managers assist the team to go from unconscious incompetence to unconscious competence while managing the risk involved with each step?
So Tony, great question. And I'm going to just turn that around just a little bit. What's the risk if you don't manage each step and you allow them to continue to be incompetent in certain skills? That is a bigger risk than trying to help them along. So that's the first thing. Coaching should always be happening on a daily basis, a weekly basis at minimum, and in real time. So when you see that they are not doing something because they don't have that skill, understand what their own values are. Do they need to make more money because they are trying to buy a better car? Do they want a vacation? If you understand what makes them tick, you can coach them to that methodology, to the individual, and then introduce and just have them try it. And it's okay. And they have to understand that it's a safe environment when they mess up on that unconscious incompetence, because they are going to mess up in the beginning.
Yeah.
It's how they're supported, coached, encouraged along the way to get to the next step. And eventually, if there's follow-up, there's going to be the next step. A habit takes time to develop. Some people say it takes 15 days. Some people say it takes 21 days. I'd say that a habit is a choice, and you can change it instantly if you have the motivation to do so.
Rob, final question coming from the crowd here comes from Raymond. So this is a long one. In terms of habits, Rob, having to adapt to different industries, how do you separate healthy and unhealthy necessary routines? For example, technology has made it feasible to stay connected 24/7. That's the truth. Checking cell phones for communications first thing in the morning and right before bed. That has significantly raised the bar in respect of time available to communicate throughout the day. In order to operate at max capacity and provide personal best, my thermostat feels like it's locked at 104 degrees. Ray, it sounds like it's hot as hell in there.
Yeah, Ray, I understand. And this is where you have to also set boundaries in life and let people know, and you have to communicate it out. I had a sales team that I had moved from Fort Lauderdale to Atlanta to manage a sales team for a different organization. And I moved up before my family did. And I was just basically from 7 a.m. to 8, 9 p.m. at night, I was fielding phone calls from the reps. And the family just looked at me and say, after they moved up, and I still continued these behaviors of, why did we move up here? Because you're not here. And I'm like, of course I am. I'm right here. They're like, no, you are here. You're on the computer. You're not here. So you have to set boundaries. I'm a big believer that we train people how to treat us. It's how we train them to treat us. So if you're answering emails at 11 o'clock at night, if you're looking at the communications at 11 o'clock at night, you're training your people to say, it's okay for me to expect you to answer at 11 p.m. So like any other habit, you need to communicate it out as well to let your people know that, hey, we need to set different boundaries. Instead of 11 p.m., I'm cutting it back to 9 p.m. It's like, you don't want to just like stretch the rubber band to the point of breaking, but take small integral steps along the way of saying from 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. is now mine. And then eventually you go from 8 to 8 or whatever you wind up being comfortable with, but 24/7 is not a comfort zone. 24/7 is a way you're going to burn yourself out. 24/7 is a way that you're going to burn your people out, burn the organization out. There needs to be time to recharge and to make sure that you're maximizing your daylight hours to dedicate to your job and to your people at that point. And then to spend the time to recharge your own battery, to work with your family and your loved ones and your friends and your hobbies as well. If you don't have time for that, then it's not a living you're making. It becomes your life. So you have to find that balance, but you have to set the boundaries and you have to train, or in this case, retrain your people how to treat you.
That's super important, Ray, and very good question. And Rob, I appreciate you answering the crowd's questions there. So everybody, that is episode 12, Live with Weiss and Rob Christman. Oh, don't worry, Rob. I'm gonna let you have a moment. So Rob, obviously I'm going to let you shamelessly plug your books again. For everybody here, we will be putting the links out to Rob's books on Amazon that you can purchase. But Rob, please, by all means, people who are just tuning in, tell us about what you got.
Well, I'm going to focus on the latest book that's about 5 months old now, Unlocking the Leadership Mystery. And there are all sorts of things in here where you can help identify your own personal values, which is extremely important. If you don't understand how you make decisions, then it's going to be hard for you to change your habits. When you understand what those values are, it'll help you to understand how you and why you're making these decisions, and it'll help you to change these behaviors that you have and change your habits. It'll also help you set goals. There's a lot about leadership as well, hence the name. And go out and buy it. You'll find out.
Definitely go buy it, everybody. Rob being, a mastermind in this theology. Absolutely check out his book. Go on Amazon. Click on the link.
Giving you an evil laugh when you called me a mastermind.
Please do. I love a little evil laugh. But Rob, I appreciate you jumping on today. For everybody out there, thank you for tuning in. Just remember, we're just the beginning of this. We talked about data. We talked about, we didn't even get into skills, but we need to be for sure first, holy moly, how to actually identify those habits and how do they make them up? And more importantly, how do you move forward to just adopt new skills? It's a lot harder than it looks. Thank you all very much. And Rob, a special thank you to you. Thank you, good
Thank you
sir.
for having me. It's an honor. Thank you.
All right, y'all. Take care. Have a good one. We'll catch you next time.
Bye.